kind of get stuck into the new EP, I wanted to ask a bit about your favourite band, Nine Inch Nails, who I'm also a big fan of. And I was wondering, we can try and, pick it apart sonically and see where you take influence. But I was interested in, how do you feel you take influence from them from a kind of philosophy point of view and from their attitudes towards making music? How do you think you kind of take influence from them?
I don't know necessarily about their attitudes towards making music. They're very serious, aren't they, Nine Inch Nails? Like you don't see them like cracking jokes in interviews and stuff. But I don't know. I think, and I don't love every Nine Inch Nails record either. Like I think their catalogue is very long and varied, and some of it's better than others. But I think they do the sort of like guitar and synth sound very tastefully. They walk a really cool line between like keeping things kind of heavy and having really great sounding electronics and still having a lot of guitars in their music and stuff. So I think we sometimes do it right, we sometimes do it wrong, but I think we definitely sort of like, if we're a bit like, oh, is this a little too far in the wrong direction, we, consult some of those records sometimes.
I guess it's that sort of balance between like acoustic and digital instruments, isn't it? I'm kind of trying to find that line. It's
interesting seeing how they've sort of embraced certain modern production techniques as time has gone on. Obviously, they've been a band a long time and technology's changed. It's cool that they kind of like cherry pick some real modern stuff, but then they're true analog gear nerds that, a lot of that is. I mean, half of the sounds on some of the newer records is like synths I've never even heard of. Crazy modular units that they've built, or like, I can't remember what it's called. There's this mental one that they use on a lot of the soundtracky stuff that they do. And it's like a sort of completely like unpredictable, like machine that just kind of randomly generates noises, and they're like strings that you like tap onto. It's super crazy. Yeah, I don't know. It's cool. Like, I like to think that we're more and more, the older we get, the more open to stuff we are. We used to be quite like rigid in our approach to writing music, and that meant that it kind of hindered us because we sort of got stuck in little boxes. And yeah, I don't know. I think we're getting better at that.
When you first start off though, do you need to be rigid in order to find your voice? Do you kind of need to have those constraints on you in order to figure out what you want to say?
I think it's the other way around. Like, I think now we trust each other enough to know that the song that it starts out as, like, you should hear some of the like real scratch demos that we send each other. Like, they sound nothing like our band, and it's more about being like, what about this flavor that is then added into the pot of existing ingredients? And which sounds really pretentious, but it's the most sort of like I guess visual way I can describe it. You just got to kind of trust each other to know, like, I know that you don't want to make a Depeche Mode song. You're just incorporating this little flavor of that in with what we actually sound like. Whereas we used to get stuck in big sort of like, I don't know, circles where we'd be like, oh, I don't think it should sound like this. The record should sound like this. And I hadn't even written anything yet. We're just fucking going back and forth arguing about, not even arguing, but just discussing this hypothetical album that didn't exist. And now it's more sort of like, we know the process, and it's just kind of like passing it around until it starts to sound like what we all know it should sound like.
When you become more familiar with the process in that way, I mean, if we look at this last EP, for example, where did the process surprise you? Where did it kind of take you by surprise during the creation of this new piece of work?
Well, nothing was happening for so long. Like, all of 2020, we were like, we've never had more than 6 weeks off the road with nothing to do ever. There's always like, we rarely get 6 weeks off the road anyway. So we were like, we have an indefinite amount of time to write, and just nothing's happening. We just kept like, because we couldn't meet up, and we do, even though we write on the computer a lot, we are often together. Someone would start writing some stuff and it'd be really like lackluster and just not right. Like, the vibe was just off, and you could tell the person writing it was like kind of like, oh, I don't know, this maybe, I don't know. It just got to like 2/3 of the way through the year, and I was like, we knew we wanted to write an EP. We were like, fuck, this is just not happening. And same with me, like, I wasn't churning out fucking gold either. Like, I was like writing loads of demos and stuff and being like, this sucks. And like lyrically just kind of like not sure what to do, because everything was so uncertain. And there's an element of like, okay, cool, let's channel that into the music, which is what we did.
Well, I was going to say, you hear that if you think of the first song, you have that kind of mantra-esque chant of "Give me direction."
Yeah, and that's the whole thing of the EP. Like, to be fair, it's a complete lockdown record in a sense, because it is so much about kind of like the uncertainty, the isolation, the frustration, and I guess a lot of it is about kind of my thoughts on British fucking people's reaction to these times and what people became. When you're kind of in it, it's kind of hard to see the wood for the trees sometimes. And I think that was kind of where we were at, because we were like, are we ever going to go back on tour? Or, no one, remember like sort of June last year, no one knew what the hell was going on. So yeah, we were kind of stuck in it for so long. And then one day it just sort of happened, and Mike had been really quietly and sneakily working on about 10 demos. And he just sent me them on New Year's Day this year. And I was like, this is all sick. And I'll be like, I'll write some stuff and send it back to him within 6 hours, like one song. What do you think of this? And pass it back and forth. But I left, I was like, just leave it with me for like 2 weeks. And I wrote like complete songs to all of these 10 tracks and sent them back. And everyone was just like really stoked on it. And then I think three of those songs were from that original batch. Yeah, and then all of a sudden it was just like we're firing on all cylinders, and we were just kind of writing loads and loads of music, and everybody was really involved. It was weird, but it felt really good to just because they were sick straight away. Like some of our best songs have sounded shit for a long time before we've kind of scratched off the coal to get to the proverbial diamond. But this was they kind of sounded like how they sound on the record.
Which were you said there was 3 of that initial batch that kind of made it onto the final thing. Which 3 was it? It
was Desperate Pleasures, Algorithm, and Let the Right One In.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Let the Right One In, it kind of takes on a slightly different emotional texture to the rest of the EP, and it has a different feel about it. How did the emotion that you were kind of using to create that song when you were writing to it compare to everything else that had come before?
Yeah, it's a bit of a separate song. Sonically, so when the original kind of super early versions that Mike sent me of that song, it was that song and Algorithm were actually quite similar. And then they kind of both went off in different directions. But Let the Right One In, it kind of sits a bit separately thematically from the rest of them. It's just a love song about caring about somebody to the point that you would like do really horrible things for them if they ever asked you to, kind of thing.
Well, that kind of feels representative of the mindset you're kind of looking at of people throughout the pandemic and the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of like at home with my fiance, who I've never really had been able to spend a lot of time with for more than these incremental windows. So I was just sort of really thankful for her and as a person, and having her to share this shit time with, because so many people, my friends, like were kind of on their own and stuff, and I'm thinking like, I'm so lucky that I've got this cool person that I love to hang out with that's here. So yeah, it's kind of writing a song for her, and maybe in a lot of ways writing a song for those other people as well.
Did you find that it changed the dynamic of the relationship in any way if you hadn't had that kind of long space of time together previously?
I mean, we got engaged, so it didn't hurt it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely. We had no, like, it was a piece of piss for us. Like, I kind of really, in a lot of ways, enjoyed the pandemic for some reasons. That being the main one. It was. I can't complain at all. I made a lot of good out of the pandemic for sure.
It's interesting though, because I mean, this EP kind of. I mean, if we look at it as something that's kind of representative of what you were thinking about during that time period, a lot of it is kind of looking at the darker aspects of what was going on and the kind of, people, the shelves in the supermarkets being bare and everyone kind of scrambling for whatever they could.
Yeast. What was that about? Everyone's getting yeast.
Everyone was wanting some bacon
bread.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone went to sourdough because they couldn't get any yeast.
At what point did those things kind of start to weigh on your mind, you think?
Well, I think they actually got a lot better. I think the first half, like 2020 was really dark. Like I wasn't really seeing that like lighter side of it. I was like, is my band ever going to be a thing again? If there's no live music for 6 years, because this was pre-vaccine, like who knew what was going to go on? I was like, oh, am I ever going to play a show again? Am I going to see my friends again? Oh, it felt so much longer, yeah. So I didn't know what was going to happen. And it was really dark, you know, and that was when people were really mean. And I just remember sort of seeing, like, I lived in a different part of Manchester I lived in, and I didn't really, like, it wasn't very friendly in my neighborhood. And people were just very sort of like, you know, for themselves. Yeah. And it just all felt very cold and very bleak. And I channeled I wrote a lot of the lyrics for the record back then. The songs kind of came a little bit later, but the way I kind of saw it was all of that, the negative sides of that were being channeled into that music. And a lot of it was, as well, wasn't necessarily from my perspective, you know, a lot of it was just kind of seeing how other people were. You're talking to all my friends, like the band really struggled, like all individually with their mental health. Like I did as well for a lot of parts of it, but they really, you know, a lot of them really struggled, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying that. And you know, loads of my other friends had a really, really difficult time emotionally. And yeah, just kind of seeing people, you know, when the Zoom quizzes kind of stopped, like everyone was like, the novelty had worn off and everything just got really quiet. I remember that period of the pandemic. It was just really bleak.
Yeah, the kind of last couple of months before things started to open up again.
The summer break. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Before lockdown too. Yeah, I don't know. I really worried about people. Like I was so worried about other people and how they were coping with it and stuff. And I tried as best I could to sort of talk to all my friends and family and be there for them and stuff. But it
very difficult
really
when you
bad.
Can't actually be there for them, like in a physical sense.
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned earlier on the algorithm and Let the Right One In. When they came to you, they were kind of in a similar shape. The song that was initially sent the demo.
Yeah.
When you're developing a song and, you know, those two tracks start to move in different directions, what is it that's kind of guiding you down that path? What is it that's leading you through the process?
It kind of leads itself, because we really do write as a five. It's not like one of us will start a song, but then it does get passed around, you know, and often like Jord will get, the drummer will get sent the song and he'll kind of restructure it, or he'll kind of change the tempo and the beat and stuff, and it can completely change the feeling of the song. And sometimes it's wrong and we go back, and then sometimes it's right, and everybody does that really. We all kind of like try a new thing, and often it'll be like one thing and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what that is, that's the song, you know. And sometimes you'll fight that. Sometimes you'll kind of be like another song that we've been working on in the studio recently, it's like a thing where it was like a real kind of groovy track, and then we made it like a much more energetic track. And for ages I was kind of like, I don't know guys, like this is not, I don't think this is the thing. And then you kind of realize that the other 7 voices in the room are like, this is the thing, and you're like, well, I guess I'm probably wrong then. And you kind of have to like take yourself away from it, live with it for a while, and then you're like, actually I was wrong in that scenario. You know, it's definitely like what do they call that? A republic, I think that is. I don't know what that is, but yeah.
Democracy.
Definitely a democracy, yeah, for sure.
At what point do you think you kind of developed a trust so that could kind of function in a smooth way?
Oh, it took a long time, you know. It was really gradual. Definitely. Like I'd say only over the last year or two, we got to the point where we completely kind of know what the band sounds like, and we trust each other to make the right choices and to have that kind of faith that it will end up in the right place. You know, I don't think, even on the last record, I don't know that we were always totally there. Every album has got better as you've gotten to know each other and write music for longer periods of time, you know, but it took longer than you would think. Not to say that when we were writing that it was completely a shit show, but you definitely have those moments where you'd sort of be like, is this, like, what is this? What is this song? Yeah.
That can create a tension that can sit quite nicely in the music though.
And it has, like, there's still tracks on all of our albums that, like, not many, like one song I'd say on each record where like one person in the band was like vehemently opposed to it in terms of like the direction that it took. And it made it like kind of difficult, but it is the right call. Do you know what I mean? I've been wrong on it before where I've been like, I'm not about this, but you just kind of have to kind of roll the punches, and it does turn out the right way. It's just a taste thing at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. In terms of the development of a song like Carbon Mono as well, you have this kind of lyrical device at the heart of it where it is a conversation.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes on that shape. How did that influence the development of that track sonically?
Do you know what? I don't know, because that song came about we wrote that in an afternoon. Like, it came about so quickly. And we'd already recorded the EP, and we kind of went away and were like, this is missing something here. So we kind of wrote it, and it came together super fast. And then we went back and recorded it in a separate session. But I think I definitely wanted to write this song that was kind of about, about progress and about all this kind of stuff that you see, just nothing changing, despite there being such an obvious solution. But you kind of realize that some problems are kind of like generationally like baked in. But I thought it'd be a bit of I didn't want to do that kind of thing where you kind of like sort of blame everything on a previous generation and you just sort of say, oh, we're the next generation and we know better than you and all this kind of thing. And I don't like it when people are so black and white about things, because the answers are always in the grey in the middle. So I kind of like the idea, even though I am firmly on the side of my generation on this particular subject that it kind of was low-key written about, I think that having that conversation aspect of it, like allowing the hypothetical older generation to have it from their perspective as well, kind of creates this interesting tension in the song, and makes people sort of like maybe think about things as more of a back and forth as opposed to a like yelling at the one side and not hearing them out.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult too, because if you look at what the older generation have achieved, they have very much pushed a lot of things further along, and they have managed to wrap up some of the kind of injustices that were going on when they were growing up. But it's just a case of, I feel like every generation can never really do enough. Like, there's always going to be more to be done, which is when you kind of look back, it's
exactly
hard to remember that things were worse previously sometimes. And
you look at and I don't know how old you are, but you look at like I'm 28, and I look back when I was in like high school, the rhetoric and the views even of people that were my age then, that even in the 10 years since then, the world has changed so much, and a lot of things that I used to hear kids say in like the fucking playground are not acceptable by any measure today, So you think about how much things have changed since the 80s, for instance. I went for dinner with my mum the other day, and she was she was talking about this, and she was just like, "You kids blame everything on my generation and blah blah." And I was like, "Mum, I'm not saying that like we're talking about climate change." I was like, "Mum, I'm not saying that you're responsible for climate change. I'm just saying that like I've not been alive long enough to be responsible for climate change. So it's obviously not my generation's fault, and I'm not saying it's your generation's fault. There's probably like 1,000 people that you could point at your finger at and say that you could change this and you haven't. And they just happen to be old enough that they belong to your generation. But I'm not blaming everyone that is of your age group for this problem."
And the problem is the people who are in a position to change things have a lot of vested interests not to.
Yeah, of course they do. Yeah, absolutely. It's another one of those things of like a multifaceted issue that people love to just kind of like put a nice neat line underneath it. But yeah, I think older people particularly get quite defensive when you start like blaming their like generation for stuff. But yeah, I tried to remind her of that. I was like, "Mum, she's an ecologist." I was like, you literally taught me about climate change when I was a kid. I know it's not your fault. It's just, yeah, I don't know.
You grew up was it Blackpool you grew up as well?
Yeah.
Because that's an interesting place to kind of think of in the context of what we've been saying, because it very much feels like a place that's kind of stuck in a particular time.
Oh yeah,
very tied to the 80s.
Yeah, totally. Like 80s, early 90s. Like it's not even changed much since I was like a little kid, barely stuck in a bit of a time warp. That's kind of part of the charm in a lot of senses, but it's also part of the problem.
Yeah, because it's almost a question of, and we could look at this in kind of what the context of what we've been speaking of too. It's how do you kind of fix something without losing something as a result of doing that, if that makes sense. Like how do you, Blackpool, for instance, how do you modernize a place like that without kind of losing the kind of rustic charm that it has?
It's weird that you should ask that, actually, because I was coming back from London on the train yesterday with Mike from Boston Manor, and we were talking about this specific like exactly what you just said. And with Blackpool, it's really difficult because it's a place that was built for a different time in a lot of senses. It's a big town, like the actual size of it and the number of buildings that occupy the town is quite large, but there's not really a reason for that many people to be there anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's not the sort of destination holiday capital of England, of Britain anymore. Nor should it be, to be honest. And there's no industry there anymore. There used to be a lot of like car factories and stuff there.
It's almost like Detroit or something.
It's really similar.
Yeah.
Like when I've been to Detroit, I've kind of felt a lot of kinship with it, to be honest. So yeah, it's a really difficult problem to solve, Blackpool, because it is still a tourist. It's heaving in the summer, but that doesn't warrant it to be a town the size that it is. And people need jobs and they need something to do, and it's definitely kind of stagnated a little bit. So I don't really know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I come from Aberdeen, and you kind of see the same thing in the early stages happening there, where it's very much a town built upon the kind of oil and gas industry and these kind of drilling platforms out at sea. And as that industry starts to wrap up, as a result of climate change, you can see it creeping into the kind of corners there, and where that's going to be in like 20 years or so,
Totally. I drove from Aberdeen to Edinburgh this year, and I saw like that oil rig graveyard that they have there on like in the estuary. I thought it was crazy. It was like 20 oil rigs that they're just like done with. They're just kind of left there now.
Yeah. It's almost, again, coming back to Detroit, it feels like when you see those photos of just like empty, blocks and blocks of houses just sitting.
Yeah, they burn them all down. And yeah, it's great. And that's the thing about Britain is I hate saying this because it makes me sound it's just this kind of sentence is associated with not very nice things, but it is a very like densely populated country. But that's not to say that it's like full inverted commas. Do you know what I mean? There's so much of it that is just like sitting wasted and unused, especially in like the north. Yeah, there's so much of it that is, they're throwing housing developments up, but there's so much of like town centres that are just empty and abandoned. So
it's just going to keep getting worse as well. Like you see the kind of more and more closures kind of creeping into the town centres too.
Well, that's a huge problem, isn't it, that they're trying to solve, which is, the high street is dead and you can't put the genie back in the bottle. The internet exists and people, especially now there's been a pandemic, all that's done is made it more convenient and more sensible, to be honest, to shop online. And there is an argument to be made that in some, I don't know the answer to this, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard someone saying that it is technically more environmentally friendly to order online, even though you're getting a lot of packaging and stuff. You're having fewer cars on the road, you're having fewer businesses have brick and mortar stores, which is increasing carbon footprint. I don't know. But now the problem is that you've got all these, like you say, these town centres that are just kind of like vape shops and charity shops, and that's it. And I don't know what to do with them, to be honest, because like where I'm from, like you don't have that middle class income that want to go out and eat and drink out 3 times a week. So, like I live in Manchester now, and there's all the little suburbs around Manchester and parts of Salford where they're throwing up all these like really nice wine bars and stuff and restaurants, and they're packed because people that live there have the money to go and do that. But, and you're never going to fill Blackpool town centre with these, craft breweries and stuff, because the people there just, they don't want that, and that's not for them. So yeah, it's a really difficult problem to solve, and I don't know how they're going to do it.
It's interesting, we've kind of spent the last 5-10 minutes talking about where Britain is at the moment and the way that it is kind of in a, maybe a slightly harsh term, but a kind of state of decay. We're seeing this kind of decline of what used to be and the kind of progression moving forward. What would you preserve about Britain today in, for 20 years' time if we're kind of looking ahead?
It's tough, isn't it? Because there's a lot I would really, really like to change. I'm not entirely sure, because I really want to do away with this weird hangover of colonialism that older people seem to be obsessed with. And
I think once the Queen goes, I think, not to sound brutal about it, but you know what, we have that, when you still have that very tangible connection in a person who was directly kind of in touch with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's hard to kind of shake the shadow of it until those direct connections are gone.
Yeah, because she lived through the wars, but that's the weird thing, though. I think is that the stupid, bigoted people that love to sort of like make things about World War II all the time, they weren't even alive then. It's like they're the children of the Greatest Generation that were alive then. So I'm always kind of like confused why there's like this weird sort of like we won the war, keep calm and carry on, like we don't need Europe, like that weird fucking middle-aged generation are obsessed with all that.
Keep calm and carry on really came back for a while as well, didn't it?
Yeah, what was that
about? It was here for like on signs and everything for.
Oh god, and all like people using it in marketing and sort of creeped me out to be honest, man.
It was after the royal wedding, I think, wasn't it? That kind of that pride came back. Yeah,
that'll be it. Yeah. Right up there, up next to the Prosecco o'clock posters. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think generally speaking, I would like to preserve some of the. It sounds super lame, but some of the architecture of our country. I think we're sort of pretty good at that because a lot of it is listed and stuff. But just really, really beautiful, and our fucking countryside, man, and our like. Smaller towns and villages and things. I'd like for them to. There's quite a few near me, like Hebden Bridge and stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with that place, but that like they don't really. It's near where my parents live, but it's just sort of like a small town. It's not really a village, but it's like all kind of independent businesses, and it's all the people that live there that run these businesses, and they have like a really cool little community. And there's not really any sort of chain anything there. Like I guess there's a supermarket and stuff, but. I think that it'd be cool if we could kind of like find a way back to having people be able to like run their own business again and do that and serve the community in doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting you kind of say that because if we look to this EP and what we were talking about in terms of how it looked at the maybe darker sides to people that emerged during the pandemic, those businesses like you're speaking about and that kind of community spirit is very much a way for us to kind of keep in touch with the antithesis of that. And keep in touch with this feeling of connection to each other.
Well, for sure. I think there was two types of people that I saw in the pandemic. There was the people that were sort of like posting their phone numbers through to like neighbours that they didn't know's letterbox, saying, you know, we're here if you need anything. If anyone vulnerable lives here, we can go to the supermarket for you. And then there was the people at the supermarket just filling their trolley full of toilet paper that they're never going to use. And yeah, I think it is interesting, and I do think. On the whole, you know, you look at like Glasgow when people tried to deport all those immigrants and stuff, and that housing estate stopped them. And so I think there is a real greatness in some communities that really do look out for each other, and then there's quite the opposite of that. So I want to find a way back to people really looking out for each other and seeing their community and not just kind of like they live in this part of this massive country. Like I do think that. There's such a thing as like local towns and communities and stuff. And, you know, even if you live in a city, your borough, like it's people do need to look out for you. You can only make change on incremental levels before you can get to the bigger stuff, I think. And I think people have forgotten that a little bit.
I think live music is another way to get back to it too, though. That feeling of when you're in a room with each other and everyone in that space is kind of connected.
Oh, totally, yeah. And it was harder to see that when there was none of it.
You don't get that with a live stream.
You really don't, man. Like, that was weird when we did that live stream. I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it, but it wasn't the same thing at all. And a lot of it, you kind of realize you don't realize what you had till it's gone sort of thing sometimes. So then you appreciate what I have a lot.
It's interesting too, because I was reading an interview surrounding the last album when it came out, and the interviewer used the word apathy in relation to describing the album, which was quite interesting to me because I'm particularly on this new EP too. Even when you're looking at certain topics with a degree of frustration, there's always, it seems to be coming from a place of compassion and a place of trying to understand. I'm just intrigued, how do you feel about that word apathy? Do you see apathy in your music at all at any place, or where does that kind of sit with you, that assessment of it?
I think that all of our previous music has been really apathetic. I think that's a really good observation, yeah. I think maybe that's sort of like youthful angst, but I feel like I've definitely kind of done a lot of introspection and kind of growing up over the past couple of years over this pandemic. And yeah, I think things are pretty bleak, aren't they? But I do think that there's a lot to be quite hopeful about, and I do have hope. And I do think that just sitting back as a musician and complaining about everything doesn't do anything, does it? You know what I mean? I think we write aggressive music as well, so I'm always going to try. It's hard for me to write about like really happy things when I'm screaming my head off. Like it definitely has to kind of. I use the. I'm a pretty glass half full guy as well, which I think people don't know me. You're quite surprised at, but I think I definitely use that sort of like stuff that is pissing me off or scaring me or upsetting me. I channel that into the music because it's a way to kind of vent that and talk about and dissect those feelings. But on the whole, I'm really positive. I try to be, and I think that trying to look to the future with a positive outlook is the best thing at this point in time, for sure.
Is that why you think the music often comes across as quite direct too? If we look at something like Algorithm, you're very directly talking about the kind of the frustrations that can come with being a musician, all these other expectations that are kind of thrown upon you. Is that kind of representation of it very much a result of you just directly trying to express this frustration? Yeah,
and I think the pandemic, like that song in particular, because everybody couldn't go out and play music, it became so much more that like everyone was suddenly like a TikToker and everyone was... It
emphasized the problem that had already existed.
I think so, and it kind of pushed people more towards that. So I saw a lot of people, and we definitely felt the pressure to do that. Like, and we tried to kind of be adaptive. Like we used to be quite a bit kind of hermits and not really want to put ourselves out there too much. But we found our own way to kind of connect with our fans through modern social media, things like Twitch. We do a lot of Twitch streaming and stuff, but we're not there like on TikTok and like, hey YouTube, what's up? You know what I mean? Like that works for other people, and that's great. It's just not our thing. But I think because people couldn't tour, they were sort of not only trying to kind of like keep the momentum of their like careers going, they were also trying to seek alternate revenue streams. So people were, they were being really resourceful and trying different things, and it's really refreshing to see. But at the same time, I definitely saw a lot of people who I know them personally, and I know they are not comfortable having to do the sort of things that management and labels were asking them to do. And yeah, like we're already like a very hands-on band. Like we either shoot the videos ourselves or we have a big part in kind of like...
You quite often direct them, don't you?
I've done that in the past. I haven't done it recently. I did some stuff for Glue, like the High Ledge video and other stuff. But I work with people who are shooting the video, and I put some of the merch together, and Dan does a lot of photography for us, and we're quite hands-on with the logistical stuff of us like getting around the world and doing shit, so we are quite a practical group of people, but you then also having to become sort of like marketers and I don't know, like TV presenters almost in the the Twitch streaming stuff is like super uncomfortable at first. Like we were not used to that, kind of just talking to the abyss. It's weird,
Well, it's funny because there's a certain falseness to it. Like when you're kind of looking at your camera and trying to imagine a person there, it becomes more of a performance. Whereas when you're on stage performing, despite the fact that there can be an element of theatricality about it, for the most part, it's kind of one of the most genuine forms of performance out there.
Definitely. Like I and that's why I thrive. And that's like why I'm in a band. It's just because I really love the performance element of it. And I love the fact that we have such an interaction with our fan base. And we're really lucky. Like our fan base is sick. And that's what made the Twitch streaming really actually quite enjoyable in the end. Was because we kind of started to build a bit of community, and I'd see that a lot of the same people in the chat all the time, and we'd have like a real back and forth, and you kind of get to know them personally. So it ends up feeling like you're kind of hanging out with friends, which is great. But at first there is that real sort of one-sidedness, which can be super uncomfortable. And you kind of get that with fans generally, because they'll kind of, we try to talk to fans in normal circumstances after shows and stuff, but they'll be sort of like, they'll kind of come and talk to you, but what they think they kind of know you, or like they're at least familiar with who you are and what you do and stuff, whereas they're a total stranger to you. So it is already unbalanced there. So I find myself kind of like trying to ask them about themselves and stuff, but which can be a bit weird to them. And it's definitely a bit one-sided at times.
You're almost trying to deflect a little bit and try and readdress that balance, kind of.
Oh, well, I'm like a completely normal person. Like I'm nobody special. I just happen to be in this band. Like I saw somebody tweeted yesterday, I retweeted on our band account. Somebody tweeted saying, the reason I like Boston Manor is they're just like five guys who really like Deftones who just mind their own business. And I was like, that's really true, actually. Like, I do feel like such a just normal person that just happens to be in this band, which is really cool.
Where do you see that in your music, do you think?
Well, I don't like to be too sort of... sometimes I try to not be too on the nose or like too literal, maybe, with lyrics and things, because I don't want to be like a celebrity, and I don't want to try and have too many people think that I'm trying to make it about myself. Like I'm trying to have my cake and eat it, in the sense I'm trying to address stuff personally and get emotions out of myself in a cathartic way. But I also want it to be like a bit of a two-way street, and have the audience be able to use that and interpret it in their own way, and have attribute that to their own experiences, rather than it just being like, this is all about me and let me tell you all about myself kind of thing. Because I don't really get anything out of that. And I don't think that I'm a particularly unusual person. You know, I'm just like everyone else.
Is it almost like in order for you to get a release from music, in order for it to be cathartic, someone else needs to react to it too and resonate with it? I
mean, I think that's an added bonus. I don't think it needs to necessarily. And there's definitely some songs that are like really personal that I'm like, I'm just going to take this one, guys. This one, I just have to get this off my chest kind of thing. And then some stuff I try and make it a little bit more conversational, you know. But it does help if people can connect to it.